Hello, everyone, and welcome to our follow-up podcast on Ainsworth's strange situation. In our previous podcast, Noema and I outlined Mary Ainsworth's 1970 attachment study. If you haven't watched or listened to that one, I recommend you do before coming back to this one because it will give you the background. And please like and subscribe for more A-Level Psychology content. Noema, how are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you. It's always a pleasure to dive deeper into these topics with you. I'm excited to unpack the evaluation today because, as you know, the strange situation isn't without its debates. So, ready to pick apart the strengths and limitations with me?
Let's do that. And let's begin with the strong predictive validity of the study.
Absolutely. One of its standout strengths is that Ainsworth's classifications, secure, insecure, avoidant, and insecure resistant, do correlate with future outcomes. For example, secure attachment often predicts better relationships and mental well-being later in life. So it's not just a snapshot, it's predictive.
Indeed, yes. And in fact, during childhood, securely attached children tend to perform better at school, don't they? And they're also less likely to become involved in bullying behavior.
Exactly. Secure attachment tends to foster confidence and social competence. They often form better peer relationships and handle conflict more constructively. It's a neat real-world reflection of how early bonds matter.
Concerning that, won't you walk us through the studies by McCormick et al. In 2016 and also Kokonos in 2007?
Sure, McCormick and colleagues in 2016 showed that securely attached adolescents tended to have higher academic achievement. Kokinos back in 2007 found that insecure attachment, particularly avoidant, was linked to more frequent involvement in bullying, either as a perpetrator or victim. So both studies reinforce that those early attachment styles have ripple effects on later behavior and outcomes.
Right. It's just that they did that from different points of view, one the positive and the other the negative, as it were.
Exactly. McCormick highlighted how secure attachment boosts positive outcomes, while Klikinos focused on how insecure attachment could amplify challenges. Together, they give us a balanced view. Attachment patterns are key, whether they lead to smoother or rougher paths ahead.
And then in 2006, Ward and colleagues looked at individuals who were securely attached as infants and then how they coped as adults.
Yes, exactly. Ward and colleagues found that those with a secure attachment history tended to have healthier adult relationships, better emotional regulation, and overall well-being. It's another piece of evidence that secure attachment often sets the stage for thriving in adulthood.
By contrast, let's look at babies who are classified as insecure resistant. And won't you have a look at that term, insecure resistant, and unpack it so that everybody understands what we're talking about?
Of course, insecure resistant attachment means the baby is often clingy and anxious, yet difficult to soothe. They might cry intensely when the caregiver leaves, but when reunited, they seem conflicted, wanting comfort yet also resisting it. This pattern can reflect inconsistency in caregiving, leading to uncertainty in the child about whether their needs will be met.
What about those who cannot easily be placed into those standard A, B, or C categories? Where do they fit in?
That's where we have the disorganized attachment category. These infants show a confusing mix of behaviors, sometimes seeming fearful, dazed, or even freezing on the spot. It's typically linked to frightening or inconsistent caregiving. So while A, B, and C are more straightforward patterns, disorganized attachment highlights when a child doesn't know what to expect at all.
So, staying with the evaluation of the strange situation study, we're confirming here that it does measure something meaningful about early relationships that has lasting consequences for development.
Exactly, the strange situation taps into real patterns of early attachment that have lasting implications, whether that's emotional resilience, social skills, or even academic outcomes. So yes, it's measuring something truly meaningful about how early bonds shape our developmental paths.
But then, as a counterpoint, Jerome Kagan in 1982 argued that the behavior observed in the strange situation study may instead reflect innate temperament particularly differences in anxiety levels that are influenced by genetics. What do you have to say about that?
That's a valid critique. Kagan suggested that what we're calling attachment style might actually reflect an infant's natural temperament. Some babies are just more prone to anxiety or calmness from birth. So while attachment theory emphasizes caregiver relationships, temperament theorists argue that genetic predispositions play a big role too. In reality, both likely interact.
Right. So if Kagan's interpretation is correct, the strange situation may be identifying differences in temperament rather than differences in attachment. How would you counter that?
I'd say it's not necessarily an either or. Attachment and temperament likely work together. A secure attachment can develop even with a more anxious temperament if a caregiver responds consistently. The strange situation still offers valuable insight into how infants use a caregiver as a secure base, regardless of temperament. So we can acknowledge temperament's role while still seeing attachment as a key relational pattern.
Right. Let's look at another strength of the strange situation, and that is that it demonstrates high inter-rater reliability. Won't you explain for a moment the term high inter-rater reliability and then go on to look at why it has high inter-rater reliability?
Sure, high inter-rater reliability means that when different observers watch the same situation, they come to very similar conclusions. In the strange situation, the behaviours, like proximity seeking or avoidance, are clearly defined. Ainsworth's standardized procedure made it easy for multiple trained observers to code behaviors in the same way. So when two or more researchers rate a child's attachment style, they usually agree, making the findings highly reliable.
So an example there was Bick and colleagues in 2012. They assessed the reliability of attachment classifications made by trained observers, and they found that they agreed on the infant's attachment type in 94% of cases. So that's very good.
Exactly. That's an impressive figure, and it shows how robust the procedure is. When different observers can agree so consistently, it gives us confidence that the strange situation is reliably capturing meaningful patterns of behavior.
And of course, that occurs in controlled conditions.
Yes, exactly. The strange situation is a structured, controlled lab setting. That control is what allows the procedure to be repeated consistently, making it easier for observers to focus on the same behaviors and reach agreement. That's key to its reliability.
And thinking of focusing on behaviors, key behaviors such as proximity seeking, exploration, stranger anxiety, and separation distress actually involve obvious physical actions that are relatively easy to identify and record, aren't they? I mean, for instance, babies who are anxious may cry, cling to their caregiver, or crawl away from a stranger.
Absolutely. The clarity of these behaviors, like reaching for a caregiver, crying, or staying near or far from a stranger, makes them straightforward to spot. That's part of the genius of the procedure. It translates emotional states into observable actions. So, even though attachment is complex, the strange situation made it tangible and measurable.
And that means that because observers can reliably identify these behaviors, attachment classifications are less likely to depend on subjective interpretation. They're more objective, aren't they?
Exactly. When we have clear agreed upon behavioral markers, like how close the infant stays or whether they actively seek comfort, there's less room for guesswork. It makes the process more objective and ensures that attachment types are assigned based on consistent, observable cues.
Right, let's go now to a limitation, one which suggests that the strange situation may be culture bound, that it may not be a valid measure of attachment in all cultures. What do you think of that?
That's a crucial point. The strange situation was developed in the US, reflecting Western norms. In some cultures, behaviors like avoiding a caregiver might not mean insecurity. It could reflect cultural expectations of independence. In others, separation from the parent might be rare, making the test unusually stressful. So, while it's useful, we need to be cautious about applying it universally without cultural adaptations.
Yes, and thinking about that, there was a study by Takahashi in 1986, wasn't there?
Exactly. Takahashi's study in Japan found that many infants were classified as insecure resistant. But that might have been because in Japanese culture, mother-baby separations are far less common. So what might be viewed as anxious behavior in one culture could just reflect different caregiving norms in another. It really highlights the need to consider cultural context.
So this suggests that when the strange situation, as it's come to be called, is used outside Western cultures, it may not always measure attachment accurately.
Exactly. Without cultural adaptation, the strange situation might not capture attachment accurately in all contexts. What looks like insecurity from a Western lens might simply reflect different cultural practices. So if we use it globally, we need to interpret findings with cultural sensitivity and ideally adapt procedures.
Noema, I think we've pretty much come to the end of the evaluation. Can you think of anything else?
I think we've hit the major points. We've covered predictive validity, reliability, and cultural considerations. So I'd say we've given Ainsworth's strange situation a thorough review.
Great, and thank you again for your very insightful observations. I look forward to doing another podcast with you in the near future. We'll still be looking at attachment. We'll pick another aspect and go for that then.
Attachment has so many fascinating facets, so I can't wait to dive into another one with you. Until then, take care, and we'll pick up right where we left off next time.
Bye now.